All right. Hey, everybody. How are you? It's very, very good to see y'all. And I get to see some of y'all in person next week. So that's a lot of fun. Yay! So I just had a quick change of plans as Sina was talking, and I heard her talk about the I am bad belief, and she talked about it was written by one who had transcended the I am bad belief. And that reminded me of something that happened in my journal recently. And so I thought, you know what, I think I will start with that. As you all know, or at least some of you all, I don't know if all of you all know, but some of you all know, on Sunday, I shared a weekly gathering about a crack in the door that I had found, a crack in the door to the first principle. I said that I found that about 3 weeks ago. Just prior to that, I found another belief in my mind that I let go of. And so possibly the two are related. God didn't say, hey, these two are related, so I can't say for sure. But with the timing, it appears that there may have been a possibility of being related. So I thought I would share that with you. Basically, something came up in my mind that I saw as something that was kind of stuck. Thoughts come up in my mind all day, just like everybody else's mind. The difference is I let them go as soon as they come up. That's the difference. In fact, I think it was Cindy this morning when she was sharing, she was reading from something, and she read a sentence that went something like this. Something like, oh, I wish I could remember the exact words because it was so perfect. She even read the sentence 2 or 3 times, but I can't remember the exact words. So I'll just have to tell you the idea of the sentence. The idea of the sentence was that at some point, you will have freedom, not from having thoughts present, but freedom from attachment to or believing those thoughts. And I can't remember the exact words. It doesn't look like she's here now, so we can't get her to reread them. But it was just one really simple sentence, and that's my experience. And when she read the sentence, I thought, that's my experience. I would be lying if I said there aren't thoughts here. The difference is the thoughts have no effect. I'm not, where once upon a time I was engrossed in them. I believed them. I felt emotions because of them. I changed my plans because of them. And in fact, I'm in a group right now. It's called a peer support group, where we're helping each other continue our awakening process. And in this peer support group, what we do is we meet every 2 weeks. And what we do for 2 weeks is we pick one thing that we really watch for. And so for 2 weeks, you're like eagle eye focused on watching for this one thing. And the most recent 2 weeks that we just did, we were watching for when self-referencing, right? When the inner chatter, when the inner chatter interrupts the experience of the flow. And what was really interesting is I watched for 2 whole weeks, and I said, what I discovered for the first time, because I've never observed as carefully. I mean, I had this, I've seen the teachings that the inner chatter doesn't really interfere with the flow, but I never watched. I could not find a single time that it interfered with the flow. I said, that's what I observed, is that the best the inner chatter can do is interpret the flow, which may then affect your experience of it, but it cannot actually affect the flow. In 2 weeks, I saw 3 times in 2 weeks. Imagine that there was like a little blip. One of them was when I was teaching here a couple of weeks ago. Some of y'all might kind of remember this, but it probably wasn't a big deal to you, so you might not remember it all. But I was teaching in my living room in Pueblo, and I was teaching that the world is not real, because that's where we are in Out of the Stillness and 7 Steps to Awakening. And Ron came home. And there was this thought in my mind that, oh, he's going to think this is weird, right? I was sitting there in the living room and he walks in and I'm teaching the world is not real. So for 2 to 3 seconds, there was this thought like, what should I do? What should I do? And then there was just continue. And that's what I did. That's what I did. So did the thought that was temporarily there that, oh no, Ron's going to think this weird, did that interrupt the flow? No. Right? It was very quickly let go. The flow went on. He sat down in the same room as me and I went right on teaching, and, none of the teaching changed at all because he was present in the room. I'll go ahead and share all three with you since I mentioned them. Not important, but I will. The other thing, now this is really funny. Jacqueline, this is all your fault. No, not really. That was a joke, but you'll hear the connection. You guys so generously gave me a bonus this year, and I really appreciate that bonus. The problem is that has messed up my healthcare, because for some reason, when you're filling out the application each year, they don't have a field for a retirement bonus. So we've been trying to communicate to them that I've gotten this retirement bonus, which should affect the price I pay for my health care. But the way their algorithm is reading it is that I'm unemployed and they put me on Medicaid. I'm not supposed to be on Medicaid. And because I'm on Medicaid, my regular insurance now is costing full price, which is because if you have Medicaid, you have to pay full price for insurance, and it's not supposed to be full price. So one of the things that I've been doing in the last couple of weeks is spending hours upon hours. I've probably been with 6 different people. There's a help desk ticket on this problem. It's such a problem. Isn't that funny? But the whole time I've been working with these people, it's been very in the moment, very present, telling the story again, trying to help them again, find a way to resolve this issue. The only time that I noticed anything coming up was when I actually wasn't working on the problem, which I think is really funny. I was walking the dog and I started thinking about it. And when I started thinking about it while walking the dog, which is purely mental, right? I'm walking the dog. I'm not working on the problem. A little nervousness came up, nervousness that maybe this won't get resolved. And then I noticed that. And of course, I allowed the nervousness, but let go of the thoughts, realized, I have no idea what's going to happen. It's all got to be perfect somehow. And it passed. But the reason I say it didn't interrupt the flow is I didn't stop walking the dog, right? I mean, we finished our walk. I went home and I did whatever I did next, right? So although there was a thought that got stuck for a few minutes, and there was some nervousness attached to that thought, the flow, I cannot say the flow was interrupted, which that was my assignment, was to watch to see if self-referencing interrupts the flow. It did not. The third time that I saw something in 3 weeks was Ron wanted to go roller skating. I was feeling a little lazy. I had the thought, and I believed it for a moment, I don't want to go roller skating. And I felt that, like you could feel the feeling of not wanting to go roller skating. I went to the bathroom, and while I was peeing, I let the thought go. By the time I was done peeing, I had forgotten all about it. And I, with enthusiasm, went roller skating and had a great time. So did it interrupt the flow? It doesn't look like it, Not even the pee. Didn't even interrupt the flow of pee. No, Jacqueline, I know that was your question, right? You want to know if I stopped peeing? Nope, I finished peeing and everything. So for 2 weeks of watching, again, I only saw 3 short glitches, which was really nice. But I also found that those glitches did not affect the flow at all. Now, I don't remember why I started telling you that, because I was going to tell you something else. But anyway, so there you go. There's a story, the end. Let's start a new story. I was going to tell you about, before I had this realization about this new approach to meditation, which feels like it might be an opening to the first principle of God. I was going to tell you something else got stuck in my mind. That's what I was going to tell you. That's how I got on this. I was telling you that most things just go by. Things don't get stuck, right? If only 3 things get stuck for, a very brief time in 2 weeks, you can see what I mean, right? But prior to that 2 weeks, something else got a little stuck in my mind, which I don't feel to share because it does involve someone else, none of you, but still, this is going to be on YouTube. But something got a little stuck in my mind. And so I decided to inquire into it. And what was funny when I was inquiring is, at first, the ego started with what I see as just a bunch of crap now. I don't even know where it is, but it started with this idea of somehow I thought that I was unworthy or something. I'm like, that's not, I said, like, I'm going to need something else. Like, I couldn't even feel that, it was like the mind was using the old language of unworthiness as part of the inquiry answer in order to distract from what I really needed to see. Isn't that funny? But I didn't believe it. You see, when you believe that you're unworthy, when you believe that you are bad, when you believe that you are guilty, you can feel that, like, that you believe that, right? And I knew that I didn't. And so I knew that somehow this was just the ego trying to keep me from looking. And so I literally wrote, that's not it. I need to see something else. And so what I got to when I saw it, I recognized it as true. And it was very interesting because it was something, just like always, it was something that had always been there that I'd never seen before. Isn't that funny? And what was causing me to get a little stuck was the idea of success. Now, this probably won't surprise Jacqueline at all. She's probably like, what, you didn't know you believed in that? You're always meeting all those deadlines. But we all have blind spots. I had this belief that I needed to be successful. Now, the funny thing is, the flip side of that wasn't, or I'm a failure, because that would take me right back to the I am bad belief. It was more like, that's the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to be successful. And I'm guessing that we all have a meaning of life thought that maybe we haven't uncovered yet. It might not be the same one. That would depend on your upbringing. But we probably all think there's a purpose to life. And we're functioning on that purpose, whether we know it or not, right? Now, once I saw that I thought the meaning of life was to be successful, I, kind of bounced back to my childhood. And I could even remember developing that belief. Because what happened, my father was a JCPenney manager. And what happened was he would get transferred every couple of years to a new store. But every time he got transferred, it was like a little promotion, a little promotion, a little promotion. And I saw this. And I thought that's what life is supposed to be. Little promotion, right? That's the meaning of life. Can you see how I developed that? So while I was inquiring on this thought of success, what I also found was that built into that thought, there was this belief, this idea that by the time you die, you have to have achieved success, or else, you didn't use life the way you were supposed to, right? Because that was the meaning of life. So you misused life. And I could even see in my mind, there are certain people that I've known that really just spent their life as drunks and never accomplished anything. And then they died. And you know what this person thought? They wasted their life. That's what I thought. And what I didn't see was that was in my meaning of life. The meaning of life is to be successful. If all you did was be drunk and then die, you blew it, right? You blew it. You didn't do what you were supposed to do while you were here. So I started inquiring into this idea, again, about success and about, this is the meaning of life and this is where you have to get to. And what I realized was I could even find in my mind different definitions of success, which I found really interesting. Like, there wasn't just one way to be successful, right? If this way doesn't work out, maybe I could do this. Or if this doesn't work out, maybe I could do this, right? There were different definitions of successful. And I found that very interesting because I thought, if there are different definitions of successful, there's no definition of successful, right? That you're just making it up, right? I mean, what is successful if you can define it and decide what is and is not successful? It's called a made up concept is what that is. And I happen to be reading Angelo's book, and he has some questions that he recommends that you ask when you're inquiring. So I thought I would try some of those. Let me see if I can find where I did that. See if any of them were really interesting. Here's one that I thought was interesting. He says, what does it feel like if I let go of the need to make this belief either true or false? I thought that was a very interesting question, because I think if I hadn't seen the question, I might have just made it, the meaning of life is successful, false, right? I thought it was true. Now it's false. That's not the meaning of life. Interestingly, that actually still leaves open then what is the meaning of life. But his inquiry was, what does it feel like if I let go of the need to make this belief either true or false? So I wrote it down as a true statement to see what it feels like, because this is what he's saying. What does it feel like? So first I wrote it down as a true statement. I must be successful, I wrote, and I wrote true. And then I felt into it. And what I felt was like a slight pressure. You know, like there's this pressure that I have to stand up to this belief, right? There's an opportunity to fail here. Then I wrote, I must be successful, false. And what did that feel like? It was so funny. It felt like, huh? Then what is the heck the purpose of life? You know, like I could literally feel that. I could feel that wobble. I could feel that, well, then what's the purpose, right? Because you just took my purpose away. And then I wrote, I must be successful, neither true or false. What does that feel like? And that's when it died. What it felt like was a meaningless concept. And so through that inquiry, it died. It's a meaningless concept, which is exactly how I see it. Just like I came to see rejection as a meaningless concept, betrayal as a meaningless concept, the I am bad belief as a meaningless concept, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I came to see successful as a meaningless concept. It's just an idea that we buy into and we define, and then we judge ourselves against it, or we judge others against it, but it's a meaningless concept. So this happened just a couple days before I discovered this open door. So, there could very well be a connection there, right? It would be funny that I would let go of the idea of success and then, find that open door, which could be interpreted as a success, but we won't do that. But that's the way these things kind of sometimes work sometimes, isn't it? So I think, although I usually don't take questions, this would only be directly related to what I just shared. Does anybody have any questions about what I just shared about letting go of the concept of success? Or anything, about your meaning of life or anything like that? Yes, Sina.
And so how do you be with someone? Because I could feel that. I could feel as because that was the inquiry, right? Be with how it feels when you're trying to be successful, or you believe there's some meaning behind that and it's important. And then the other side, and I felt that. I know when I'm trying to be successful, how that it contracted, it actually feels for me. So my question is, what about when you're working with someone or whatever, and that is their way of being, and that or you're with someone and they have that belief in place?
I can answer that. First of all, there's an intellectual understanding that something is not true. For example, a lot of people in Awakening Together have the intellectual understanding that the I am bad belief is not true, and yet you still believe it. And you do because you can feel it, right? So there's a difference between having an intellectual understanding that something is not true and actually having had the insight and let it go as a meaningless concept. Once you let it go as a meaningless concept, it cannot bother you again in any environment. That's the whole point. That's, it just dies. Like once I let go of the belief in rejection, I never saw rejection again. I saw couples break up and go their opposite directions, but I saw that as what was supposed to happen now. So the way you see completely changes. So what I might see if I was working with someone who, quote, was really caught up on success, was I might see that they're really creating a lot of pressure for themselves, and I might have compassion for them, but I'm not going to feel any pressure from that because that's not my deal anymore. Right? So that's the real answer, is when you really let something go, it no longer affects you. Okay? Don't get me wrong, you can still see that other people believe it, but it still doesn't affect you. The fact that they believe it is not a concern. Anything else? Yes, Jacqueline.
Yeah, thanks, Regina. I actually think this points to a larger issue. I'm trying to find. Oh my God. Sorry.
That's okay.
Somebody didn't want to hear this.
Oh.
The larger issue is the question of the meaning of life. I hear what you're saying about success, but once you remove that success, then that question still remains. So what is the meaning of life?
Oh, that's good. It actually doesn't remain for me. That
Good.
only remained, I'll tell you, it's funny, Jacqueline. When I said the statement was true, what I found was the pressure of needing to succeed. When I said the statement was false, that's what left the openness for there must be a meaning. What is it? When I said it's neither true or false, even the meaning of life died.
Good. I mean, yeah, I've been through some stuff similarly, and we can talk about it when I get there, I reckon. But just about this meaning of life question, and got some real sweet answers that I will share with you maybe when I come see you.
Yeah.
Let me just say, on that question, I was pointed to the introduction and the first meditation in John Aston's Searching for Rain in a Monsoon book. So,
okay.
Really helpful. Thank you for letting me share. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, no, I would say right now, the way that this has shifted in my mind, that I would say, if somebody said, well, what is the meaning of life? I'd say life. Life is its own meaning, That's the meaning of life.
In fact, that first meditation is called The Miracle of Just This. So
yeah.
Same thing. Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, then. So the reason I was prompted to share that was because, Sina, when she was doing her announcement, said that this retreat was written by someone who had transcended the I am bad belief. And again, that's true. And one way that you could tell that was true is when the ego started trying to tell me, oh, I thought I was unworthy. I'm like, no. What's really going on here? Because there was no feeling of that, right? Like, no, that's not connecting with anything, so what's really going on? And because I continued to inquire, I got to what was really going on. And as a result, had a legitimate shift, Yeah. So it's always important to feel within yourself what's true and what's not true when you're inquiring. All right, so we're now going to the 7 steps to awakening. David Hempel signed up today for the Regina satsang. That's exciting. At least to me. I love to see David Hempel. All right, so 7, I had a text. That's why I said that. There was a text as I was going to my phone because that's where my book is. So out of the stillness, 227, that's where we're at. So 7 steps to awakening, 227. The wise can know how deem as real a world divided and destroyed by time's wheel, whole, eternal, perfect, ever shining and transcending time and space, such is the nature of reality. So again, remember, this is Muru Ganar putting Ramana Maharshi's teachings in poetic form, which means sometimes you have to read a little more carefully. When he says the wise can know how deem as real a world divided and destroyed by time's wheel, what he's saying is, the wise just do not see that. They're just not going to agree that the world is real, and that time has an effect, because that's not how they see. Kind of like I was saying a moment ago, when I let go of the belief in rejection died for me. And, when I see, quote, couples breaking up, I don't see them rejecting each other. I see it was time for that to end and time for something else to come into being, right? So you don't, when these concepts are gone from your mind, you don't experience them anymore. You don't see them anymore. And so if someone has awakened to the first principle of God, they're not going to see the world as real anymore. They're simply not. So the wise can know how deem as real a world divided and destroyed by time's wheel, whole, eternal, perfect, ever shining and transcending time and space, such is the nature of reality. So they experience reality as opposed to a world of things, the 10,000 things, as the Tao says. So let's go see what came up in my journal as I contemplated this. The process of awakening is a process of going before the limited mind. Mind is like a prism, which refracts and disperses light. Although the light isn't actually changed by the prism, the light's purity can be seen best before the prism. So this is a lot like what I said on Sunday about, the dirty mirror, right? We cannot help it. And by the way, not only we, but everybody else. So this is where you can take this and apply it to everyone in your life. We cannot help but see through these unconscious beliefs. Up until I saw that success was the meaning of life for me, I didn't even know it. And yet, Jacqueline, what did I say when you suggested that maybe I should miss a deadline? Do you remember what I said?
You've made it this far without missing a deadline. You weren't going to start now or something like that, right?
Yeah, I said, I don't even know how to do that. I went my whole career without missing a deadline. Let's see, was I driven by success? I couldn't even accept that missing a deadline was a possibility. I don't know how to do that. I'll stay up all night long, and I did before I miss a deadline. And I never missed a deadline in 40 years, by the way. And yet, did not see that I was driven by success. Isn't that funny? By believing that success was the meaning of life. So, and in fact, one of the questions that's in Angelo's book that I asked was something like, how does this belief affect you negatively? And I literally wrote, I can't think of a single way. Like all it did was help me throughout my life because, everything I tried to do, I did my best at, right? Like, I don't see how that hurt me. However, it might have been the block to me finding this open door to the first principle of God. Maybe that's how it was hurting me, didn't hurt me in form. It actually seemed to be a very helpful belief in form. But yet that doesn't mean that it wasn't in the way. And that's why once this got out of the way, this other thing was able to open up, right? So again, the point is, we cannot help it. We are completely innocent in being driven by beliefs that we don't know about. And so is everybody else in your life. We are completely innocent in being driven by beliefs we don't know about. But the fact that we're innocent does not mean that we shouldn't try to uncover these beliefs, right? Because they are in some way holding us back. Some people have the opposite of the belief that I had. And in fact, this is something I never understood, which again is evidence that I had this belief. Because when people would talk about, I have a fear of success, I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, I couldn't even comprehend fear of success. But guess what? There are people that have this fear of success, even though Regina couldn't comprehend it, right? How is that going to hold them back in their life? This fear of success means every time they almost get successful, they're going to sabotage themselves in some way. Right? And yet they have no idea that's going on in most cases. They don't understand the mechanisms of it. Maybe somebody told them they had a fear of success, so they can say, I have a fear of success, but they haven't actually seen it. They haven't actually seen it as a false concept. And so they're still driven by it. Nearly everybody on earth is driven by the I am bad belief, right? Even the most successful people are driven by the I am bad belief. So the point of this is that the process of awakening is a process of going before the limited mind, which means before we are trying to get back to before, and of course this is just a symbol, but we're trying to get back to before, to the pristine mind, before all of these beliefs were adopted. That's what the spiritual path is. So you could say that a primary role, literally, maybe the primary, but I'm going to say a primary, A primary role on the spiritual path is inquiry, uncovering what the heck am I believing and not noticing. That's my job. What the heck am I believing and not noticing? That's what we're here to do. And for me, I can only share my personal experience. Like, well, I can share what some other people have told me. But for me, the best way to do that was exactly the way I uncovered the success belief. Look for something that gets stuck. It always causes something to get stuck. Beliefs don't just flow through. Thoughts do. Thoughts can flow through if they're not believed and leave absolutely no stain whatsoever. They just come and go, come and go, come and go. But beliefs get stuck somewhere. So you want to feel for the stuck point. Feel for, I was listening to you guys last night. I loved how Holy Spirit in that message to me said something like, make your only purpose me. And then said something like, you could call that peace, joy, and love, something like that, right? I thought, what a perfect description of the goal, just perfect peace, joy, and love. So if you keep that in mind, the goal is just perfect peace, joy, and love, then what you're looking for is anything that's not that, right? And that's where you inquire. That's your entry point. If it's not peace, joy, and love, I've got something here that I can go in and look for. Because it's what's not allowing me to experience the reality of peace, joy, and love. So that's what was always most helpful to me. Now, I do know people do it in other ways. I've known people, like I'm in this peer support group now. I suppose this is the first time I've ever done something like this. People get in groups where they help each other find these beliefs. I suppose dyads are a little bit like that. So if you get in with the right group of people with the right purpose, you can help each other see where you're believing something. But that has to, in my humble opinion, that has to be done in a very loving, non-attacking way. I really don't think those groups where they get in there and they attack each other just to see if something will come up. I think there's a lot of ego in that. So I don't recommend those kinds of groups. But if you get into some kind of a peer support group where everyone is loving, everyone is kind, everyone understands they all still have stuff that can be found, and you're helping each other to find those spots, that can be very helpful too, right? But this is the purpose of the spiritual path. The process of awakening is a process of going before the limited mind. Mind is like a prism, which refracts and disperses light. Although the light isn't actually changed by the prism, the light's purity can be seen best before the prism, which means nothing, you've heard this before, nothing's actually ever gone wrong, but you won't see that until your mind is clean. Then you'll see, like in the last 2 weeks, I could see that the mind could not interrupt the flow, right? But do you think I could have seen that 15 years ago? No, I could not have seen that 15 years ago because there was too much stain on my mirror, right? It was still true, but I couldn't see the truth of it. So that's what's in the journal for 227. I'm going to move on to 229, reading first from the 7 Steps to Awakening. Only mad folk, perplexed because they deem the false world to be real, find joy in this illusion. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of the Matrix, where I that one guy, I can't think of his name, but
Morpheus.
He was, no, not Morpheus, the guy who was eating steak and said he wished he'd never taken the pill because he wanted to taste the steak again.
Yeah, sorry. Not
You know what I'm talking about, though. That's what he said. He was sitting there eating a steak in the illusion, but he was knowingly in the illusion because he'd been outside of it in the Matrix. And he says, I wish I'd never taken that pill, because I just really want to go back and eat steak again. Well, this is saying that's not actually true. That was just in a movie. In reality, once you awaken to reality, you could never enjoy the illusion again. You couldn't go back and eat your steak and enjoy it. And in fact, remember, Bernadette Roberts tried telling us this in a number of different ways, which I've put in the Gentle Healing curriculum, so you've probably read it, where she talked about how the most beautiful things in our world are monstrous compared to the divine, right? And that our greatest joy here is like the size of an ant compared to an elephant, compared to the joy that you know in reality, right? So she was trying to tell us there's just no comparison between what we experience and reality. And that's what this is saying as well. Let's see, only mad folk perplexed because they deem the false world to be real find joy in this illusion. So this is saying someone who's awakened to a reality could never find joy in this illusion again. The truly wise find joy in nothing but awareness, which is being, which of course is one way of describing reality. That's it. And NTI says that too. NTI, I think it's 1 Corinthians chapter 15, talks about awakening from an illusion of beauty to beauty that is beyond illusion. And it says that once you've awakened to this, you can never go back, right? You can never go back. And so that's what this is saying as well. So let's see what happened when I contemplated that. Number 229, in Out of the Stillness. It is time to give up ideas of happiness because of, and because of is in italics. It is time to give up ideas of happiness because of some person, relationship, event, or situation in the world. Any idea of happiness because of is an attachment to the world. Every attachment to the world keeps illusion in place through desiring illusion. Dive into the joy of being, which is always present. Let this be the only source of happiness. When the joy of being is the only source of happiness, happiness reigns constant and attachment free. And this became a very focused goal of mine, very focused. I began to play a game. And by the way, not all of my games are going to make it into the games because I'm quitting in about 5 more games. And it's funny, like all these games keep running through my mind. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to do this forever. So I'll just have to share the games in other ways, like when they come up while I'm teaching or something. But one of the games that I used to play was practicing doing nothing and being happy with being. I know you guys have heard me talk about this before. So, for example, if I'm at the doctor's office, and the temptation comes up to just start on the phone, I would purposely put it down and say, no, I'm going to just practice being happy with being. And I would just tune my attention into being. And I would have to say, look for the joy in that. But I looked for the joy in that in a positive way, not in a negative way, like I bet I don't really find it. You know what I mean? Like there was an openness to finding it, right? So I would just be and look for the joy of being. And then the flip side of that game was, I would notice whenever I thought I was happy because of something or someone, and I would not like distort that in any way. I let that happiness be there. I didn't think, oh, I'm not supposed to be happy now. I let that happiness be there, but I noticed that event ended. I paid attention to the temporariness of it. Like I'm really happy now because of this ice cream cone. Ice cream cone is gone. And then I would say, is being still here? And then I'd say, so which one is, more substantial? Which one, if I learn to be happy with that, what's going to make me happiest? Being happy with an ice cream cone or being happy with being? And you could say I trained myself to notice that anything in the world that made me happy was temporary. Therefore, it was not sustainable. The only thing that was sustainable, the only thing I could count on for permanent happiness was being. And I would keep practicing being happy with being. And now I don't have to practice that anymore. At one point it was a game, it was a practice. Now it is my experience. In fact, when I have nothing to do, my body lights up. You know, it's like I have fallen in love with being. And a symbol of that is the way my body lights up when I sit back with nothing to do. It's like, oh, good. All we're going to do now is nothing. You know, like it literally, it gets all excited. I can feel it. And in fact, I stayed with Jasmine last week. Some of y'all may have noticed that in the background. And in fact, I was wondering if anybody wondered why there was a China and a Kazakhstan sign behind me. But Jasmine was born in China and her boyfriend was born in Kazakhstan, and they're both adopted Americans, but they have those signs hanging in their apartment. But Jasmine commented twice last week, which I found very interesting. She said, "You really just like sitting in stillness, don't you?" Because she would notice that I was just sitting there doing nothing, because I didn't have a lot to do at her house. I didn't have to go clean her house. I had a few things to do, but that I brought with me, like I taught for an hour, and of course I still did my meditation, my contemplation. I had Ellie, I still had to walk Ellie, but I didn't have as much stuff to do at her place as I do at my place, right? So I spent a lot of time just sitting there, perfectly happy. And she saw that. And twice in the week commented, you really love just sitting in stillness, don't you? So when we learn to genuinely be happy with being, even when we're doing something, we're actually still being. What happens is we find ourselves just happy for no reason, right? It's not attached to anything. It's just this happiness that is, because being is. So what we're reading here in the journal, which is really fun, is this is when I decided to start playing that game. Listen to me. It is time to give up ideas of happiness because of some person, relationship, event, or situation in the world. Any idea of happiness because of is an attachment to the world. Every attachment to the world keeps illusion in place through desiring illusion, because I think I need that to be happy, right? I mean, of course I enjoyed last week being with Jasmine. I don't get much time with her anymore. But was that the cause of my happiness? If it was, then I would have been very unhappy this week because I'm not with her anymore, right? No, I was happy. And in fact, yesterday when I went into my peer support group, they asked us to describe how we were feeling in one word. And I said, happy. And then the facilitator said, like, happy with what? I was floored. I was like, I'm happy right now to be here. And I said, and when we're done, I'll go grocery shopping and I'll be happy to be there. I didn't know how to answer the question. Happy with what? I'm just happy. No, with what? And then she went on to talk about how, something has happened in her life that she was really happy about. Right? Now, whatever that thing is that she's really happy about it's not eternal. It's going to come to an end. So it is time to give up ideas of happiness because of some person, relationship, event, or situation in the world. Any idea of happiness because of is an attachment to the world. Every attachment to the world keeps illusion in place through desiring illusion. Dive into the joy of being, which is always present. Let this be the only source of happiness. When the joy of being is the only source of happiness, happiness reigns constant and attachment free, right? And people will still think you're happy because they are. They can't help but see through their beliefs. They believe things, and some things in the world make you happy, some things in the world don't. So if you're happy sitting on top of a mountain, they're going to think you're happy because of the mountain. If you're happy doing dishes, they're going to think, wow, she really loves dishes. If you're happy sitting there doing nothing, it'll be like Jasmine. Wow, you really love just sitting in stillness. See, she still thought it was a because of, because that's that I would have been happy if I wasn't sitting in stillness, right? But people will think it's because that's how they see it. It's kind of like when Nisargadatta was with that man who accused him of somehow being, a person because he was smoking. And Nisargadatta answered him by saying, it's your I am the body belief that sees me sitting here smoking. That sounds like a cop-out if you don't understand. It's like, that's a cop-out, you're just not admitting you're an addict, right? But if Nisargadatta genuinely sees no world, is no longer the body. I mean, this door that I've opened, I don't know how to talk about it, but if you are just the sensation, or you are just the clarity that's arising right now, or you are whatever, you are just that which is here right now, you aren't a person with a smoking habit. And this is what Nisargadatta was trying to explain to him. You see a person with a smoking habit because you believe in persons, right? And again, none of us can help but see what we believe. But the spiritual path is the process of uncovering those beliefs so that they can be seen through and they no longer have an effect. That's how we clean our mirror, right? So one of these things we can do, which is what 229 is pointing to, is start letting go of the idea that I am happy because of, right? That it's circumstantial. And again, the way I did it was by practicing being happy with being open to discovering that love, because I wasn't at first. My mind was sitting there saying, this is boring. You could be checking email, right? But I was playing a game. The game is, can I fall in love with being? And when I thought I was happy because of something, noticing that it was temporary. It was never sustainable. So the contrast of those two games, I would say, was very helpful. I'll have a drink and then we'll move on to 230. We're actually just going to look at B, my journal, 230B. So 230 in the 7 steps to awakening says, what is the true self's transformation? What is the true self-transformation? Oh, I got to read self twice there. First is the capital S self. Second is the little s self, in case you don't have the book. What is the true self's self-transformation as the world? A twist of straw appearing as a snake? Look hard. You see no snake at all. There was no transformation, no creation, none, no world at all. Now, this is something that is very clearly still beyond my understanding, but at least now I smile when I read it. But anyone that I have ever read that has awoken to the first principle of God does 2 things, which I think is kind of funny. One, they describe how incredibly different it is. It's an entirely different dimension, right? You can't describe it with word. And 2, they say it's always been this way. Isn't that kind of funny? I suppose to find out how that paradox makes sense, we just have to go awaken to the first principle of God. That's the way we're going to do it, right? But that's what this is saying. It's saying, what is the true self-transformation? What is that? And then it says, well, there is no transformation, right? It's always been as it's always been. But it's kind of like I told you guys that, in this last 2-week assignment, when I was watching to see if self-referencing could cause a change in the flow, interrupt the flow anyway, what I found was that it never did. And I realized that's always been true. But could I have seen that 15 years ago? No. So somehow our seeing changes so much as we awaken that we see what's always been here that we did not see before, but nothing actually changed. Isn't that funny? It's just our mirror was so friggin' dirty. That's the only thing that was wrong. And that's why it's called reality, right? It is what's true. It's the truth. It is what's real. We are misperceiving, right? So again, 230 says, what is the self-transformation as the world? A twist of straw appearing as a snake? Look hard, you see no snake at all. There was no transformation, no creation, none, no world at all, right? That's why it's called an illusion. We're misperceiving. So, again, how did I contemplate that? 230B is what I have marked for us to look at. It is time to take full responsibility for the seeing. But this does not imply responsibility for the making. What is not there has not been made. Therefore, you cannot be responsible for making it. Oh, I remember this clarity hitting me for the first time. This was a shift. It was something I had read before, but it's always up there as a little confusion in the brain because you don't see it, right? So this is the day that the confusion in the brain ended. I had some understanding, of course, of the third principle of God, although I hadn't developed that language yet, but I certainly had understanding that I had picked up in NTI Ephesians of what we focus on, we experience. What I was not able to see yet was that I got to figure out how to say this, that was never created as an actual thing. So let me pick an example. It'll be the best way to do it. Let's talk about guilt. If I focus on thoughts of, I should not have done that, I'm such a bitch, blah, 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 I'm going to start feeling very, very guilty. Would you agree? That doesn't mean guilt is real. So the confusion was, before I thought that if I focused on thoughts of guilt, I made guilt. I made something real. Does that make sense? I made a thing. I made guilt. I made fear. Those things are never, ever real. And in fact, this is what the Power of Light message tried to explain. If you're familiar with that message that Laurent received, the Power of Light is saying, like if the guilt arises, just stay with the guilt, notice the intensity of the guilt, and realize that's God, and it will transform into God. Why will it transform into God? Because that's all it ever was. It's like we're looking at God, but we're coloring it with these glasses that we have on, and we see guilt when the only energy that there is God. The only thing that there is God. And we're saying, no, that's guilt. No, that's unworthiness. No, that's failure. No, that's right. It's all just interpretation. But the only thing that's here is God. So what happened when I was contemplating this about there is no transformation, right? As I'm contemplating this quote, either Sina's listening to somebody else or she just got it because her mouth went this big around. Yeah, Jacqueline, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she's reacting to the question that I just typed in. I don't know.
Oh, maybe.
But what about the code and the fact that if you choose to feel guilty, you're putting more guilt energy out into the collective?
Call that more interpretation.
Okay.
You're putting the possibility for that interpretation out there.
Thank
and
you.
other people are buying into that interpretation, right? So it's when I was contemplating this quote that for the first time I got that. It's funny because I still have to take full responsibility for the seeing. I still have to take full responsibility for the fact that I'm believing guilt thoughts right now, and I still want to inquire into that. But I never actually made guilt because God is all that's here. You see? I got that for the first time here. And this is really, really helpful because I know you guys have been trapped in this. I was trapped in it. I think we all get trapped in it. If we think we're actually making guilt, we feel guilty for doing it. Yes. When you realize you're not actually making guilt, you're interpreting God as guilt, that's different. Do you see? Think about the apple for a moment when I was the apple. As the apple, I saw only light, awareness light, I called it, because it was aware, but it was light. I saw only light. Didn't matter whether, if the apple would have seen this, Dr. Pepper, it would have seen light. If it had seen this book, it would have seen light. It didn't matter. I remember when I was contemplating the apple experience, shortly after it happened, I realized that a sword is light, an arm is light. A sword through a light, light passing through light is nothing. When I was the apple, my daughter took a bite out of me. It was nothing. It was an interaction of light with light. So what's happening here is we are interpreting God as the 10,000 things, but we never actually made the 10,000 things because it's all still God. And when you awaken to the first principle of God, that's what you see. Until then, you don't see that. But we can have trust in these teachers. And this is what's happening here is trust with number 230b. I'll read it once more and then we'll go. It is time to take full responsibility for the seeing. I still need to watch, am I believing in guilt or whatever? It is time to take full responsibility for the seeing, but this does not imply responsibility for the making. What is not there has not been made. Therefore, you cannot be responsible for making it. So I am not guilty for believing in guilt. I'm just experiencing God as guilt, and that's something I want to correct. Does that make sense? So it doesn't change the work. It changes the guilt about the work. Right? Okay, so you guys contemplate that, and it's time for us to go, and I'll see you. Well, I'll see you next week, but Jacqueline, I'll see you before then. I'll see you Tuesday night, right? Okay. Bye, everybody.